I have it too.
And I believe we're live.
Yay!
I hope everyone in the comments can see that we're live.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to a seasonally booked up chat. This is the final chat for Fall of Vices and Dices, and we're chatting One Night is Never Enough by Anne Mallory with a special guest.
I love this book so much. I feel like you only read it because I yelled at you about it. So
Yes. That's an accurate
I was like, you
statement.
cannot do gambling romances without this one.
No. And I mean, I think we're all very glad that you did.
It's not a lie. But how is everyone doing? Let's chat about what we're reading and drinking before we dive into the discussion. I will start us off. I love a red wine. I'm drinking a Cabernet Sauvignon. And then I'm currently reading A Taste of Sage by Yafa S. Santos. I've been very in the mood for foodie books. It's like a hungry time for me. Thanksgiving, holidays.
Sure.
I just want books that have recipes in them. And this book starts off with Puerto Rican food on the first page. So I was real into it.
I love that. Keep us posted on how that is. I'm also always down for a foodie book. I am drinking some pink bubbly, as always, my jam. And then I am rereading one of my favorites to read at this time of year, which is Her Naughty Holiday by Tiffany Reyes.
That's what I'm reading.
Is it really?
Because we're doing an episode of Fated Mates on that trilogy. So
yes, you are. And it's like such a perfect
so
trilogy.
Good. So good.
So phenomenal.
That's so funny.
So highly recommend that everyone read it and then can go listen to the Fated Mates episode on it.
Yeah, well, you took my answer, so there's that. And then I'm really boring. I'm drinking seltzer water, which is no fun at all. But I actually spent the afternoon hanging out with Erin Leaf from Learning the Tropes podcast. And so we did some drinking. We did some pre-partying before. So now I'm on the sparkling water train.
Right. That seems exactly. like a good call. A good call.
Yes.
Awesome. All right. So I think we don't really have any content warnings for this book. If we think of any as we talk, we'll try to shout them out for y'all if anyone needs to dip.
I mean, gambling away a heroin is like...
Right, that's totally off.
It's kind of problematic, but...
There you go. There's our content warning for the entire book.
Exactly.
And a bit of violence and assassinating happening. It's fine.
Look,
if it's casual,
what's the point of reading a historical if there's no violence and assassinating and possible heroin gambling?
Just our typical for this season in particular.
If there's no wager, we don't want it.
If there's no wager, we don't want it.
Right.
And yeah, I mean, we can see all of y'all's comments. Dana can pull them up on the screen. So if you have any questions about anything we're talking about, anything you want us to talk about in particular, we can bring it up just like that. So I want to start us off with, so during our bombshell interview, we mentioned that our theme this season was Fall of Vices and Dices, all gambling hells all the time. And you immediately, Sarah, were like, read this book.
Yep.
What made you be like, oh my God, they have to include this in their read along?
Well, I think the Merrick brothers are some of the best gambling scoundrels there are. I think Anne Mallory is one of these writers who I feel like Anne she doesn't write romance anymore. And I feel like part of the reason why she doesn't write romances anymore is because nobody ever gave her the love that she was due. I think I still believe all these years later that she is one of the very best of us. And many, many years from now, I will still be yelling at people about the Merrick brothers and about so many of her other books. I've never read an Anne Mallory book that isn't practically perfect. And so for me, I can remember there are, a handful, obviously I've read a lot of romance novels, as many of you know, and there are a handful of them that I can remember where I was when I was reading that book. And this is one of them. Like, I can remember exactly where I was. I can remember how I felt, like the whole experience of reading this book. And I just think this is one of the sexiest heroes ever written. I think Roman Merrick is like, I would leave my husband for him over and over and over again. But also that the whole scene where ultimately like she is the wager, I think is so beautifully done. I love, nobody does hero POV like Anne does. And like, there is just the push pull of Roman, like coming to realize that his obsession with Charlotte is love is, it's just perfect. I just think this is a perfect book. Also, the chess scene is like, kaboom, mind blowing.
From like page 1 in the Discord, we were like, oh, this is Sarah's it. Like, we like immediately were like,
oh my God. Oh my God. Oh my God. And then she falls asleep. I just can't. It's so good. It's so good.
It is.
Yeah. I mean, all week I kept thinking about this book using, like, I feel like your word when you really love a book is delicious.
Yes.
This book is delicious.
From page 1. Like, from the moment, like, and also Anne just drops you into the world and trusts readers to just like understand. I love it. She doesn't spoon feed you for even a second. And it's really amazing. Like the level of faith she has in readers to go along with the story is something that I think we can all learn from as writers. Like, it's a really remarkable feeling to be a Mallory reader, because it feels like she's telling you a story that just like swings for the fences. She has another book where through most of the book, your question is whether or not the hero is alive or dead. And so like, and the whole time you're like, is he a ghost or is he real? Like, what's happening here?
I love a ghost.
and you don't actually know like what is happening. Like, but the whole time you're just like, she's so good at it that you spend the whole time thinking like, oh, I just trust that she's going to take me on this journey. And I just think she's so remarkable.
Yeah. Trust is like exactly the word we were talking about today. So today we talked about in Discord, the final section of the book. And we really kind of hit this point. We had all week, we're like, we get so little of his POV, and it's wonderful when we do, but so little of it throughout the book, and like so little of his backstory. And it hits this point where I think you as a reader and Charlotte as the heroine have to be like, do I really know him? And like, what is knowing him? Is it knowing the biographical info of where he comes from, how he takes his tea? Or is it knowing the things that I've observed of him? And I feel like Charlotte has to make that choice. And Mallory puts it to the reader to kind of make that choice too. I feel like, do we know enough about him to like believe in this hero, trust this hero? And like, I love kind of how that ends, but I see how I think it's very unconventional, the way that she wrote so much of this. I can see how not every romance reader is going to come to this and fully connect if they're not like, okay, I'm here, buckled in, ready for this
I
journey.
Trust her.
Like,
And that is the book somebody asked in comments, the title, It's for the Earl's Pleasure, is the book I was talking about. And I think that's part of why Anne, I mean, honestly, I don't know her, but I assume that that's part of why she left. Like, she wasn't to straight down the middle, right? She's just not straight down the middle. Every one of her books does something just a little bit curious. But I actually think that Roman as like Cypher is a really fascinating. He's just, I mean, I think that you see so much of him, but she's so deft and delicate in the way that she gives you pieces of him. My God, but that chess scene, I just like the whole thing is just, and then the end, I mean, she also kind of has an instinct for what we want as readers. Like, that end is bananas. Like, you know, there's running around, there's kidnapping, there's like, you know, like all sorts of crazy things are happening. And we're just along for the ride.
And we almost don't get the traditional HEA of a romance. Like, I think there's the trust that this is a romance, but the option on the table of her just being like his mistress while married seemed like it could just work, right?
And I kind of would have loved it.
Yeah.
It would have been wild.
Well, but we've seen that, like, it's like Anne walked so that Joanna Shupe could run, right? Like, you know, there was a moment, I feel like at that point, there was this like, I mean, I don't know, I forget when this book was written, but what?
2011.
2011. Like, we couldn't write They Don't End Up Married in 2011.
Yeah.
But like Joanna just wrote that last year. So I think, you know, I think it's just proof that Anne was really like always thinking ahead.
Yeah.
And always, I mean, I will say, like, she'd been writing for a while before I started writing, but we both wrote for Avon for a few years until this was one of her last books for Avon. And I know, like, it always just felt like Anne was writing like outside of the rest of us. Like she was just ahead of us in many ways.
Yeah.
So.
And you sense that so much in the ending. Cause I thought it was very satisfying that Charlotte was ready to full become a spinster in the public eye. And meanwhile, there's this moment at the beginning of the bet, right, where she feels like all of these men are like dogs circling around a bone and they just want it because the other dogs want it. And like that's such also kind of like a romance hero thing, right? Like they want their heroine for them, no one else. So to have Roman be this hero who is fully prepared to have her marry someone else and get whatever like little bit of her he could, because he was like, that is what's going to make her happy. That is what she needs in her life. And I'm going to give that to her, was like kind of magnificent.
Yeah.
Like it's so, and obviously we love, you know, that he wants St. George's and the white gown and everything. And she's kind of like, why don't we elope? Like,
perfect. But I mean, he thinks about that from the first moment he sees her. He's like, she's going to marry this other guy. And then like, I'm going to become her friend. And like, then she's going to like cry on my shoulder and then we're going to do it. Like, then it's just going to be the two of us. And he knows it. He has their future because of course he believes he can't possibly be worthy of her. Right. But he has their future mapped out from the second he sees her for the first time. And like, it's amazing how they're fated mates. Right.
Yes. That's the vibe we were picking up on all week. It felt so paranormal. It felt so fated.
We talk about all the vampires.
I was going to say, I am dying to talk about the vampirism in this book because it is fucking all over the place. Like, he's obsessed with her pulse. The second he's fully seated, he is. When they're having sex for the first time, he's like, the second he's fully inside of her, he like nips at her neck. Like he talks all the time about how he's a creature of the night, how he doesn't even exist during the day. She talks about how he doesn't sleep. And like, I just feel like Anne like wanted to write a vampire book, like a vampire historical, which I would so be here for. But it just felt like I was like reading the synopsis of Dracula. I was like, was this trying to be some kind of metaphor? But I think she just likes vampires. Like,
that's so funny. Yeah, maybe. I mean, and also to be fair, like this is right around the time that like vampires were huge. All those paranormal series had just taken off. Like Cressley was writing, Janine Frost was writing, J.R. Ward was writing. Like maybe you're picking up on like just the appeal
were in the air.
Yeah. But yeah.
Yeah, because there's even the moment, right, where they're in Sam's house, I think, right? And he has like this like leather thing and he like uses it to tilt her chin up and then he like examines her neck like he's obsessed with her neck.
And then we even have the bloody roses, the blood red roses.
Yeah, like, all the flowers.
One-eyed Bill.
And the flower that he leaves in her coach, in the rented coach is I did notice like there it was like, you know, the red veins of the flower. I mean, yeah, clearly.
It's all over the place. Like
you have picked up on a thing.
It's amazing. What else? I'm looking at my notes.
I loved Roman as a character and just like how much he talked. That was like the first thing I said to Kelly on Monday. I was like, he talks too much.
He's so chatty.
He was showboating a lot. I loved it though.
He was. Well, and so often like using it, I think like you said, Sarah, right? He's like dropping these little hints for anyone who cares enough to pay attention to them. And otherwise just fully like leaning into this performance of this like careless smile, roguish attitude. And yet he like shifts though all the time for Charlotte. Like when in the first scene with the chess game, right? Like when he realizes that she thinks that he's going to hurt her, he immediately shifts gears.
Yeah.
And he's like no longer trying to like play this role. He's like, nope, here is who I really am. But yeah, I did like that about him a lot, because if we're not getting that kind of traditional introspection backstory from these point of view chapters of him, we have to get it somehow.
Yeah.
And these were like such great ways to really get to know him.
And Anne plays really interestingly. Loretta Chase does this too, very deftly with her books and her heroines, but Anne plays really carefully with her heroines' perceptions of the heroes. And she does a thing that like not all of us do, and partially that's because I don't think all of us can do it very well, where she will tell the reader how she'll write like she just had a sense that like if she left, like if she ran from him, he wouldn't chase her, right? Or like if she did this thing, he wouldn't hurt her. Like if she took the bird pin off of his hand, like it wouldn't be dangerous for her. Yeah. And some writers, when they use that, it's sort of just like it feels like a cheat. Like, as a reader, you're feeling like, oh, well, that's just so that they know that, so that I feel comfortable and it's all safe danger. But with Anne, there's this real sense of like, oh, well, I'm not sure that she's safe, right? But she's sure she's safe. And so as a reader, you have to trust that the heroine knows better than you. Like, I think there's something, I feel like a broken record already. Like, I just think Anne is better at this than I am. And I think like she is, I think it's really remarkable when you're given a character who you have to trust that the heroine is right, even though you are feeling like she never feels too stupid to live. But you're just like, oh, I don't know that I would trust him, but she trusts him. So should I also trust him? Like there's a constant question. But you always feel like her actions are safe. Like she's like being true to herself.
Definitely. I feel like the PNR vibe helps with that too, in a way. With right, with like a fated mate, that they're never actually going to kill each other. That they understand the significance of who they are to each other. And I think that very much helped in a lot of those scenes, because both of them kind of have this like intuition that they're constantly feeling about each other. Like his intuition to play the game against her father, and Tran, like hers, that she can go and take the pin out of his hand, and that she can like ultimately trust him at the end. And I feel like it's because of these PNR vibes that I'm like, okay, like you two got this. Like maybe I wouldn't make these decisions, but I feel like, but also I think something that's been really interesting this season is seeing the way that different writers deal with having a gambling hell at their center. And do they kind of have that just be a fun location that they go to, or are we like playing with that as an overall theme? And I feel like Mallory does so many interesting things with it as a theme, where at the beginning they're both so mocking of her father. Like, how could he take this risk? How is anyone so stupid to lose all this money, to lose their most valuable things? And then they get like riskier and riskier and riskier because they're seeing this larger payoff. Like the scene I really loved is when they're dancing in the ballroom. It's like actively playing with fire. Like they're surrounded by people who could figure them out. And yet, like, they still go and they fuck each other down the hall. Like, they just keep, like, placing higher and higher bets on everything until they both hit a point where they're like, I am so careless, I'm going to lose everything.
Yeah. Well, that's the promise of the premise of the gaming hell, is that ultimately the risks will get so big for, you need, in order to write a gaming hell well, you need to have, the owner or the hero or heroine who owns the gaming hell needs to be it needs to feel like they are entirely in control of everything all the time until love makes them risk like way beyond anything that they would ever risk, right? And she just does it so well, in part because of what you said at the beginning, where we never really see Roman's interior thought processes. So when they do start to like just totally unravel later in the book, you're like, oh, this has gone off the rails.
Oh yeah. Especially I love like his warnings from Andreas, who is like, you are losing it. You are losing it.
Yeah.
He's like,
oh,
I'm
that's
fine.
perfect too, right?
Stop
Like
babysitting me.
I
Like,
don't need you
this.
to tell me. Yeah.
And then all of a sudden someone's throwing knives at us. Like, that's the turning point.
I had totally somehow forgot. This is classic me. I had forgotten about the knives. And I was like, wait, what's happening? And then I was like, knife throwing. I'm for it, Anne. So
I love like all of a sudden Andreas is like bleeding out on the floor and they're like, Charlotte, you're a lady. You know how to sew, right? And she faints. And she just gets up and then does it. But
that's like where I love her though, that she's kind of like wipes her mouth off. She's like, all right, I'm gonna sew him up now.
Yeah.
Like,
well, because if you're gonna be a Merrick, then you're gonna have to play this in this world. Like this becomes your whole world. You can't. That's the other sort of gorgeous. This is why I love gaming hell books, or I love like any book where there's like a criminal under element or like anything that's not above board, because it's reverse morality. Like part of the joy of this book is that it's morality chain in one direction, and then it's like reverse morality chain in the other direction, where because you have to like Roman's only decent by the end of the book because of Charlotte. But then but like I said, if you're going to be a Merrick, you have to be willing to just like turn away and be, a Merrick forever. Nobody invites you back to a ballroom.
Yes, exactly. And I feel like she did a great job of showing these like little ways from the moment where like Charlotte starts to kind of seize her own destiny. And like that first one really is when all of the like men are fighting over what to do with her after the bet. And she's like, all right, I'm going this way with him. Goodbye, everyone. And it just like so nicely builds from there. And like that feels like another moment where she's like with Andrea, she's like, I'm gonna have to deal with this annoying guy for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
I probably should save him because like my man loves him. And like she has this like great moment, I think, of standing up to him first at the card game, and then that's this like, okay, I'm actually going to save your life. You kind of owe me now.
Mm-hmm.
And from the start, I feel like even at the beginning, before he's really introduced as a player for her, we have like Charlotte dealing with this like idea of like her knowing she's a commodity in society and dealing with the fact that she knows she's beautiful and she knows everyone else knows she's beautiful. And what that really means for her as being just a pawn for men, and also wanting to take the brunt of anything to protect her sister. So I feel like she was well like aware of the way the world worked, and she was willing to find her freedom. And I think sometimes like the Wallflower character doesn't, it's like a higher pedestal to fall because it takes them a while to even get to that point.
Mm-hmm. Well, Annie is saying in comments that like part of what she was bothered by was that this like initially Charlotte's so focused on reputation. I mean, right at the first scene, the first line of the book is like she needed to slow down, right? Because she was moving too quickly. Ladies didn't walk so fast. Like, and so she's always part of, I mean, it's interesting that's how you read that, Annie, because for me, like that first page is like, oh, she is literally, she could explode right now. Like before anything happens with a hero, she could lose her mind. And so I feel like there was for me, that characterization at the beginning really worked because by the time she unravels her reputation and sort of throws everything to the wind, you're really feeling like, oh, she has been tipped. She's been pushed and pushed and pushed and pushed.
Yeah. She feels like she's at a breaking point where it's like literally the next tension in her life could sink her.
And he like kind of messes with that. I mean, like he is both able, he pushes her, and then somehow is also the only like she's somehow able to fall asleep in his like lair. I mean, like there's this again, it's that fated mates thing where like he's villain, but he's not. I mean, she trusts him so implicitly.
Well, and he's the only one like giving her a choice at that point where they're all arguing of what to do with her. And he's like, maybe we ask Charlotte what she wants to do. And then he offers her, he's like, would you like this non-alcoholic beverage? What game would you like to play for game night?
Yeah, for game night.
Like he's just presenting her, I feel like, option after option. And then like I feel like the key is that he falls asleep first. Is that he is like, I will be vulnerable in front of you in this way. And that's when she's like, okay. And I feel like that's when she really is like fully, she's in his bed, but she had still been pretty stiff, like sitting on the edge, and she really starts to let her guard down because he's like doing everything to show her like, I am not like
asleep.
I love that shit. Like
so hot. It's perfect. It's perfect.
It's so good. It's so good. I want to come back a little bit to the morality chain stuff you're talking about, because I think it was really interestingly woven in with the charity work that they both do. And it's like so fascinating because they both are characters who feel like they are like beyond help in like whatever. Like he is like, I am so damned. I've done so many terrible things. And she's like, I am like welded to this path. I cannot get off of it. And she puts all of her efforts into how can I help other people avoid this fate, whether it's like she talks about like the ribbon owner's wife she wants to help, her sister, all these charities she's involved with. And then he's doing that for like all of these like little orphans that he's bringing in. He's gave all of trans money to the orphanage. Like he's like, I'm gonna. So it's like we see that. And then it's like an interesting choice on Mallory's part. Like all of his sins are really vaguely referenced off page.
Yeah.
Where it's like that guy who threatened to ruin her reputation after finding them mysteriously goes to America.
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
is he alive? Is he dead? Like we don't really
Don't worry
know.
about it. It's fine.
Like, but I really liked how I feel like Charlotte's focus in terms of charity was very like, what do people need as their baseline? What do people need to survive? They need housing, they need food, they need shelter. And then his is really focused on like dreams, like what do people need to be fulfilled, to be happy? Because he's always talking about like, oh, okay, this like one little boy clearly wants to learn how to cook. We're gonna send him off to the kitchens, like, or helping Charlotte, like she wants freedom. I can do that for her. I can take her father's debt. I can like get her what she wants. And just like to have those two charity things working together and complementing each other so well, I thought was beautifully done on Mallory's part.
Yeah.
This is, I think, our third book this season where we had a gaming hell owner who was helping orphaned boys.
Well, I mean, of course.
They all had their childhood
because
like Lorraine Heath.
I mean, who among us is not written a terrible dude who like sends all his money to orphans?
That's how you balance the humor.
Yeah, because you're like, no, he's super awful, but also it's okay because look at all these little babies who are better for having him, right?
It just softens them.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's like, God, I mean, I wrote a whole casino series, and like, it was. I mean, like, one of them just carries a pig around the whole book because, like, I was like, it's like, how do I make him soft and kind? Like, here, have this pig.
Clearly, it's the first answer to anyone's question.
So, no, I mean, your orphans are they're a nice, quick way, a shorthand for readers. Like, he's not all bad. Look, here are orphans.
Exactly. I really want to talk about, speaking of just, we're very fixated on Roman right now, which I'm loving. Like that first sex scene, because it's her first time having sex, penetrative sex, but it's all in his POV, which I thought was
an important choice.
We never see that.
Really rare.
I feel like it nicely takes virginity off of a pedestal in this book, all about taking Charlotte off of her pedestal, and also puts him in a position where he's like talking about looking into her eyes and she has expectations of him. And she's the one constantly throughout this book dealing with other people's expectations of her. No one has any expectations of him. He's a gambling hell owner. And suddenly he's the one who has to live up to someone else's like idea of him. And it like freezes him in his tracks, like almost doesn't know what to do with himself over all of that.
I mean, I think that's really smart. There's this, some of you have probably heard this, but there's, when you're writing a book, a romance novel, especially in dual POV, often you many times while you're in the writing process, if you feel like something's going wrong, often it's because the POV is wrong in the scene, right? And you're telling it from the wrong perspective. And the general rule is you're supposed to tell the story from the scene should be told from the character's perspective who has the most to lose. And I think oftentimes when you're writing the first sex scene for a character who is a virgin, it feels like, well, they're the ones who have the most to lose, especially in a historical. It's like often the heroine does, in fact, like she could lose her reputation. She's losing her virginity. She's losing kind of, all of these things. But like, I mean, there's something to be said for this being Roman's scene because he's about to lose himself to her, right? Like, everything that he has ever believed about himself is about to change because this woman is his fated mate.
Yeah. And he like fights that so hard, like through the end of the book, but particularly in that scene, he talks about like petting her hair and trying not to think about how terrified he suddenly is over like what they've done, which is just like exactly what I want from like a male hero point of view.
Perfect. Can we talk about soon? Is that on your list of things to talk about? Because
the letters sure as hell are. Yes.
Soon. I mean, and also that goes back to that sort of sense of like this constant like threat in a lot of ways. Like it's a promise, it's a threat, and you just feel like the spring is just constantly being wound tighter for you, for her, for him. Like there's this constant sense of everything is about to come unraveled, and the force with which it is about to come unraveled is beyond your comprehension.
Yeah, I feel like it was also another great way for him to give her a choice.
Yeah.
Because she is the one who's ultimately like, okay, we're just doing
it's
this.
now.
We're having our meeting.
I can't.
Right? And it's like, it's tantalizing for her and for the reader, but also this way of him like making sure she's okay.
Yeah.
And then I love anytime a writer does something where like for the first half of the book, soon means this, and then the second half, it's a thing that's keeping them apart, where it's like, soon I'll see you again, soon. But it's like, it feels like it's getting longer and longer rather than something at the beginning half of the book where it's getting closer and closer. And that switch is so like the total opposite of like draining all of that tension. Yeah. Suddenly it's this fear of like, she thinks that she might actually never see him again if he can't get to this point of feeling like it's safe enough to be together.
Yeah. Oh, so good. The reverse pickpocket. So good. Oh. So good.
I love that he like slips it like into her bodice more than
I know.
She's just like made him pull out these little notes that he's leaving her.
I love it.
Oh, Dana, you had been about to say something earlier before we got on the soon conversation.
Oh, sorry, Dana.
Oh, no worries. Oh, well, I was actually going to say how I actually don't like the sex scenes in this book.
Oh.
Which is probably contradictory, but I like all of the language in this book and how Roman is centered in a lot of it. But I really didn't like the virginity scene because he just tells us he's going to take care of her, but we don't see that he takes care of her. We just kind of get the penetration and that's about it. And that is kind of the theme for a lot of the sex scenes, I feel like, in the book. There's a lot of caressing, but not a lot of like what is actually happening, which
very big.
Kind of, yeah, I think if this was a book that came out in 2021, we probably would get more detail in that way. But I was like, are we having real preparation here, man?
So you wanted it to be hotter.
But I think that for me was kind of, I loved the themes of this book, but I wanted some more concrete moments, like the assassin scene. Like I wanted more of these kind of memorable moments like Vauxhall, that I feel like this book kind of was a lot of feelings and vibes, but not a lot of like plot.
Yeah. That's actually a really good point, and that is a very Anne Mallory thing. Like the plot is there, but you have to, it's all sketch. Like you have to fill it in yourself, because for her, I think vibes is a really good way of framing it. Like we did not have that word in 2011, but like it did feel like that was what Anne was always doing. Like there was just this sense. I was thinking actually as I was reading it, rereading it this week, it reminds me a lot of Charlotte Stein, because I have always said that I think the joy of Charlotte's books is that it feels like you are inside a phone booth with two people who are falling in love, and you're like, oh my God, like, please get, like, it's too much. I can't, I feel very weird about standing so close to these two people who are like so intensely falling in love. And I think Anne has that feeling too, where you're like almost too close to you're too close to it. So you feel like, oh, I'm sort of bombarded by feelings and vibes. And like, if I could only get like 6 feet back, I might be able to see more of it.
Yes.
I can totally see that.
Yeah. Because you're right, Dana. There's like a lack of those kind of, I think, big typical moments that we see in a lot of romance novels. And then feel like here, those big moments tend to be conversations.
Yeah.
And like that is the moment, rather than like, oh, they went here or they did this or like X, Y, and Z happened. Especially because this is so Charlotte's book in so many ways, where it's like we're following her through the ballrooms, through the kind of like minutia of her life, which isn't very thrilling. Like even to her, it's just going through the motions and then these thrilling little moments that she has with him. But it's also so interesting how much time passes in this book. Like I was so surprised every time it was like, and 2 weeks later, and like all of a sudden, but also it makes you feel like when right immediately after that first sex scene, it's like they skip a number of weeks and it's like, oh, they've just been having sex all the time. And I'm like, good for them. Like, that's
great job, everyone.
Like, happy for you. But I like that it makes you feel like they have known each other for a long time. Because I do think sometimes,
which is rare.
Yeah. Like it can be so encapsulated of like 5 days and all of this happened. And I think there's a lot of challenges in doing that kind of a plot well as well. But here it really did feel like they had so much time together and we got to see the most important parts of it.
Which I think is why, as a reader, his backstory coming so late in the book feels very jarring as like a reader, because it's like, we've gone this whole time, you guys really know each other, but I still, and she still doesn't know, like, what the fuck you're doing, man? Like, who are you? What is your business?
Again, don't worry about it.
I mean, I feel like, right, like we all have those friends who it's like, what does their partner do for work? And like, you don't know. And it's just like, we don't know what Roman does.
No.
But that like was a soap opera villain there of like, he just does nefarious things. What those nefarious things are, I have no idea. But it's cool. Like, you do you.
Exactly. It's like Grey Enterprise Holdings Limited. Like, nobody knows what Christian Grey does. It's fine.
What do they do? What do they sell?
What do they enterprise? What is held?
No. Just right, because that's the thing. They're like, we have the gambling hell, but also all this other stuff.
Sure.
We don't even really know who his enemies are in this book.
No.
Like,
but people are throwing knives. So
sending assassins.
And like, I mean, I feel like that's again like the trust that Mallory's putting in us and that Charlotte is putting in him, where she's like, okay, you're gonna protect me and it's all gonna be fine. And I don't need to know the details.
Right.
Like
Well, that's
Who
what
exactly is after us?
Well, she knows. Oh, go ahead.
One of our favorite scenes is when they're like after the whole assassin aftermath, and all the men are standing around and they're like talking about who the guy was, and they know who the assassin was. And she's like, "Excuse me," and they're like, "Oh, so you don't get what's going on right here?" And she's like, "No."
She's like, I know someone tried to kill us.
I love it.
The extent of it.
But you know what? What a baller move on the part of Anne Mallory. Like if I were writing this book, I'd be like, now I have to seed the assassin in for 10 chapters beforehand. Like, but you don't. You don't have to.
You don't. Well, I was expecting that in these ending. I was like, okay, we're gonna get there. We're gonna get there. And then we never did. And I'm like, I'm still satisfied. Like,
yeah,
I had my big moment of them in danger. Like, that's really all I want out of a villain plot line anyway, right? Like,
maybe it's like the equivalent, whatever he's doing is like the equivalent of me discovering about 6 months ago that my husband had never seen Pretty Woman. Like, we've been together for 20 years. I discovered this 6 months ago and I was like, I need to rethink.
Everything. Has this been rectified?
Yes, we have rectified it.
Did he enjoy it?
Yes. Well, I mean, he had no choice. I was like, you're going to like this, okay?
Like,
is it problematic? Yes. Are you required to like it? Yes.
It's fine. We just have to lean into it. Yeah. No, that's the thing. And I think you're right. Like, Mallory just has a way of pulling it off where, like, I think even Dana, what you're talking about with the sex scenes, like being so vague, and yet there's so much heat. There's so much tension. Like, for someone who really,
well, he is, I mean, it's him. There's like this real romance hero feel to him. Like he's like he's central casting romance hero, right? Like big problems, like big backstory that you don't really know, secrets that you probably won't ever fully understand, definitely doesn't think he's worthy of love, sexy, like doesn't, like everything he says, you're like skirts are blowing up. And like, you're just like, I don't really get why this works, but it's like she has a sixth sense for this romance, the promise of the romance hero.
Yes, no, I agree completely. And I love that we still get that moment at the end. I mean, I think what's really great is that right in that very first scene where he sees her in the ribbon shop and he sees how like kind of daring that she is, even though she's afraid. Mm-hmm. And he like turns to Andreas and he's like, oh, I think I'm in love. Like he says it so early.
Yeah.
And then when it comes to actually saying it, he's like trying to convince her. He's like, no, I'm bad. I've done bad things. I'm a bad boy.
You shouldn't love me. I'm unlovable.
And it's like, I want that scene so much. It's always so perfect. And she's just like, sure, babe, that's okay. Like, it's fine. Like,
and I love how that scene is mirrored in that other scene later in the book with the sister being there. And he's like, this is like one of the first times he's like really out in daylight, which furthered the vampire speculation, where she's like pushing him away, like, get out, my sister's here. And
it literally says you don't exist during the day.
I mean, it was very there. And like the sister is just like, wow, he is in love with you and you're in love with him. And either dummies just don't get it.
Can we talk to, because in the aftermath of that scene, he's like in the alley, he has no control over himself because he's so obsessed with her, and he fucking keeps her hairpins in his pocket. So like rubs
Derek
them,
Craven
like,
style
stone, like when he's upset. Like, I love it so much.
Mm-hmm.
And exactly. It's Derek Craven. Cat Sebastian has a hero who does that too, because the heroine's always losing hers. He's like, it's fine, I got you, I'll do it. Like, and it's so, I think that too, right? Where they're taking these greater and greater risks, but her protection and safety is always at the forefront of his mind, because she talks about where it's like his hands were everywhere and yet nothing is out of place. Like he only touches the nape of her neck because that's an easy thing to pin back her hair. And I think, like Sophie was saying in the chat earlier, like the caretaker vibes feel so strong here. Mm-hmm. And I think works so well with that. Like, I mean, that's what we want, like this dark, edgy, like kind of alpha-esque hero, but also this soft, orphan-loving, hairpin collecting, like sweetie pie.
Yeah, you want the hero to be like able to justifiably punch someone in the face and like lay them out, but also to always, always, always know where you are, like in that moment, and be ready to care for you.
Yes.
And that's why romances are amazing, because that's just not physically possible in real life. So
We try.
Unless you're a vampire. I mean,
unless he's an actual vampire, that is true. And then completely accurate, very plausible.
Yeah. And I think he also has a nice moment of just like heroes with stuff in their pockets.
I know.
I like the moment where she is left there like little fuck against the door. Someone has come and discovered her. She immediately is like knife to his balls, like get away from me, stranger.
Mm-hmm.
But also it's like this, her holding the knob, him holding the other side of the knob, and like rattling it so she knows that he's there if she needs him to be. But also, you know that he could break through this door if he wanted to. So he's also like letting her like, okay, she can handle this and I trust her and I'm just going to be here for her while she deals with the situation, was like such a delicious moment. And then of course he kills him or sends him to America or whatever.
Sure. Well, I mean, that's after.
After. It's like she's gotten to
like,
save herself.
You did great, hun. And now
I will make sure you never have to deal with that human again.
Exactly. Like it's a heads of their enemies moment, right? Like a bag, like this person is now your enemy and I will bring you their head. Like
you're welcome.
As tribute.
And but also doesn't even tell her. It's like she overhears it from someone else.
Yeah.
That they're like, oh, did you hear Jonathan went to America all of a sudden?
Yeah.
And she's like, Roman, like, that's what we have to do with them.
That's what happens. A nation of criminals.
Can we talk about Violet really quickly? Her mom.
That was an interesting relationship.
Yeah. And I feel like, right, she's so cold, she's so rude to both of her daughters. And I just really love that. I think you, again, expected that to kind of go a certain direction.
Mm-hmm.
And instead, we have Charlotte seeing herself in her mom and just being so determined to try to salvage whatever bit of their relationship that they can. And like even Emily is like, nope, like she doesn't want to come with us to the park. Like we should just go. But I love so much, and especially with this setup at the beginning of women really being just like enemies, like out to get each other, out to cut each other. And like she has received such kindness from Miranda. And I feel like it's a moment where she gets to like pay some of that forward with her own mom, who like likely had the same exact trajectory that she did of being welded to these tracks of her life without any choice and without knowing how to do anything differently once she's like set down there.
Yeah, I feel like every romance novel is made better by a strong female friendship. Like it can never damage a book. Like it can only just make it better for me.
I agree.
And Miranda really showed that. And I think like Charlotte caring about other women was one of the best parts of her character, in that it like helped her realize like what not to be. And I think she was able to see her own coldness in realizing like that she was a commodity by like understanding her mother. But the wildest part about Violet as a character was the whole interest from Bill, was just like the most bizarre like thing. Like it seemed like reading it like it was just something that made Anne laugh. So she was like, we're just going forward with this little like plot thing here.
I loved it so much because again, heavy vampire imagery where he's like, you are more beautiful than bloody veins are. What?
That's a big thing from Bill. Oh,
Bill.
I think that I'm so glad you brought this up, because I think when I first read this book, like Violet was just, I just sort of blew past her as a character. But now I feel like now as I'm getting like older maybe, and so I'm becoming more sensitive to, you know, how you make choices based on the life that you have seen your mother live, right? Like Charlotte starts to see like how her mother has been, a handmaiden to patriarchy, right? Like molded by it. And then also, like molding her daughters in the image of patriarchy. And like Charlotte here has this opportunity and like makes a decision pretty early in the book that she's not going to she's all in on Roman, like pretty quick, even if she's resisting, whatever. She makes her decision. And so I think there is a real moment where Charlotte sees, like, I can rewrite it and maybe my mother can understand.
Yeah.
Or maybe there is hope. And then there is Bill.
And then there's Bill. I think too, she so much of this book feels like
same Annie. Especially that last part.
Real. Very real. So much of this book feels like it's also about like the burdens that are placed on women, where Charlotte is put in this position to like fix all of her family's problems. She has to emotionally manage both her mother and her father. She has to be the one to protect her sister, like, and deal with her own. She literally is asked by her father to be both like, whore and Madonna, like all at the same time. And I think she, at the beginning of this book, is sacrificing so much of herself to do that for other people, which is something that is very, I think, ingrained in women. And I feel like in this moment with her mom, she's learning the balance of that, right? Like when to protect people and then when also just to like lend that helping hand and be like an open bridge for them to cross if they want to meet you there. And to like less tie herself down specifically to like, I have to do this a specific way, or I have to do this for someone this way. And more just like finally learning to like live on her own, and that she can show that path, not only to her younger sister, but like to her mom as well. So like her mom can have a different life.
That is so often the story, especially of historical romances, like telling this, like modeling this idea that like the responsibility that is ingrained in girls, right, by the world is we don't have to bear it if we don't want to. You can make a different choice. And I think it's always it's a nice reminder every time you see it. I mean, 42 years in, I'm still like, oh, I don't have to do it. Like always.
Yeah. And I think this is where I also appreciated Roman so much as a hero, because I think at the beginning, Charlotte has this vague idea of what freedom looks like. And I feel like part of what Roman does, it's like if you did not have all of these kind of things expected of you, all of this weight on your shoulders, like who could you be? Who would you be? And like she doesn't know the answer to that. And I feel like the book is her finding the answer to like, who am I as a person if I don't tie myself to the expectations of society, of my family, of my sister, and like of myself, right? Like these self-made expectations of who you have to be. And like the way that everything that he does crafts her freedom to have that self-discovery, I felt like was so powerful. And like a very different form of hero caretaking for a heroine.
Yeah.
And I feel like this book could have very easily gone in the direction that a lot of historicals do, of like focusing on the class difference aspect between the two of them. And because it's so focalized around Charlotte, like that's not even like the biggest like issue to overcome here. Like it's not like the problem. And I even love that point with Trant at the end where he's like, I'm going to become an earl. And she's like, well, good for you. And she tells Roman, like, oh, you could do that. Like, you have all of this power. Like, why don't you like fight for something like that? And he's like, nah, that's not important. I don't care about that. And I feel like that kind of furthered like this like book wasn't about hierarchy in that type of way, which I thought was really refreshing as well.
I agree. I think especially because her family is like getting more and more destitute, like her father's selling off all the items in their home, that it also helps give her a closer connection to him of like, she's not like at the top of the ton, you know, like her family is in pretty dire straits. And I feel like that helps to bridge some of that. Because you're right, we only really get it at the one garden party scene where people are like to the Danburys, they're like, how dare you invite the lower classes? And then she's That's it.
Yeah, the thing about, again, that sort of goes back to the, why I love a gambling romance, because it feels like, again, the power, it rewrites power as, title doesn't matter. What matters is, literal power, like, information or money or whatever the thing is, physical power. I think all romances are about power, and I think often, to Dana's point, like in historicals, at some point that question of like, oh, he's titled but I'm not, is it really like that interesting as a question after you've read it 200 or 300 times?
Right.
And I think, and I say that as somebody who's written a lot of like, title, untitled, relationships, but I'm now sort of not that interested in that question anymore, because I think it's rare that you can do that story and really like tell it in an interesting new way. So that's why I love these stories, because it feels like, it's always a question of like, what's the difference between being noble and having nobility? Or what's the difference between power and being born into power and gaining power, making your own power?
Yeah, I agree. And I feel like we've seen throughout the season, the hell can be such an equalizer for characters. And like, we, especially since we've exclusively really focused on historical romance as a book club, like we're constantly looking at the ways that like, obviously our heroines did not have any like political, societal, really like agency officially in these times. So it's always fascinating to us to be like, how did they get it for themselves?
Right.
And like, how did they get it for the other women in their lives? And the hells make it so interesting, because sometimes it's about like literal card skills and their like intelligence we've seen this season, or sometimes it's about this, where it's like playing these different kinds of intellectual games, or like deciding to make their own choices, take their own risks with their lives, with their bodies. And I think that does add something so interesting.
Yeah.
Like,
and you've also
aspect.
Like, you read Joanna's Uptown Girl series, so and that one has, I want to make my own, I want to give women power and like pleasure myself, and run my own hell. Like, so I think, again, and all of these end up being about parity. It's about finding partnership and balancing power beyond title.
Agreed. I feel like this is a nice segue into our closing section as we get closer to the hour. So all season, Sarah, we have been asking at the end of each book discussion, would we actually want to go to this gambling hell? And like,
is the answer ever no?
There have been some that have been no.
There have been some. I think because it's like they just don't seem as interesting as others.
Okay. Got it.
And like, our last week's one had like champagne fountains. Like, of course I want to go to that gambling hell.
Definitely.
Secret room where sexy orgies happen. So
yes, also
like Joanna Shoup style, they were like peepholes. Like, it was thrilling. But we don't get a ton in the actual hell. Like, I feel like I would love to go around Roman's actual chambers and like all of his soft, comfy chairs. And, like,
it feels in line with just like
drink.
Mallory's writing. Like, it was vague, but like some great things happened there that we know about.
Yeah. I feel like the more interesting things happen behind the scenes at this gambling hell, like in the private rooms. I would still go.
I would go too.
Yes. I'm confused because I definitely would go to any gaming hell, any one of them. Gross, nice, champagne fountain, Diet Coke, whatever they're pouring, I would definitely go. So
Diet Coke would be
Diet Coke gambling hell. That would be my ideal. Champagne fountains and Diet Coke is actually my ideal gambling hell. All right. So we're going to speed through, I think, this next section. So we've been doing it all season. So this is our book ranking section. So everyone in the comments, feel free to rank along with us. We are going from our bottom to our most favorite book of the season. And who knows? Sarah, these are always very interesting because it always feels like at the end of discussing a book so in depth, like it feels like that has to be your new favorite book, right? Like it's like, so it's always.
Well, we did this when we did the Fated Mates. When we did the IAD reread, we were keeping track after every book, and it is not easy. So
very difficult.
It changes constantly.
We forget what we ranked last week, and therefore new rankings happen.
We ended up switching it out so that we were ranking actually all the heroes, all the heroines, and all the books, because it started to feel like, well, my favorite book is not necessarily my favorite hero. So it sort of made it easier.
I think very much like that. Like, and especially when we did our Summer of Sarah, I like needed to have it written out, because you get to a point where there's also so many books. Yeah. That it's like I need to write out the order of the lives. Like, I will never remember.
We had a full-on Sarah Hawley from Wicked Wallflowers built us a spreadsheet that then calculated calculated everything by some sort of weighted average, so that by the end other people who were listening to Fated Mates could rank theirs too, and ultimately we had this is the best of the IAD books.
I missed this. Oh my god,
it's amazing. I'll dig it up and send it to you.
Yes, I would love to see it. All right, we ready, Dana?
Yeah, I've got my books on the side.
Okay, you and I are usually pretty good together. I think we are very opposite this season.
Wait, so this is one?
This is
the bottom. We start from the bottom, and we.
Oh my god, that Heath at the bottom.
My issue here is that I just wanted more. There's no interior monologue in this book at all, and I am very excited to read.
You
more
like a feeling.
I do.
Love the feeling.
I wanted more. I wanted more. That's the thing. It was I enjoyed it a lot and just wanted more.
Okay.
Okay. 2.
The Linden for me.
The Linden. I liked the Linden a lot. Yeah, the Roth was same. It was such fun ideas, super rompy. And
I'm here for the rompy. That's my thing.
I know you were here for the rompy. You were so here for the rompiness. All right. Next. Mine is the Linden for this one. I like this one.
I'm so excited to read more.
I want to read more. Yeah.
Have you guys not read Lorraine Heath? Neither of you have read other Heath?
I've only read one other. We haven't done Gorilla Twins.
My favorite. She's my favorite.
Where would you recommend we go next then with Heath? If we were to buddy read and
that's
pick up a book
is that
tomorrow.
number? Is that Scoundrels of St. James #1? What is that?
Is this #1? Someone in the comments probably knows. I think it might.
Is it Scoundrels of St. James?
Let me look it up.
Don't remember the series names.
It would say it on it. I mean, that was a pretty big. Hang on. There, it's hard. She does a lot of devils.
That's the thing. Yes, this is #2 in the Scoundrels of St. James.
I mean, I really love that whole series.
Okay.
But my favorite Lorraine Heath is Waking Up with the Duke, which is the premise is that the hero and his cousin were in a carriage accident, and the cousin lost all use of his body below the waist, and he is married, and it basically begins with the cousin saying to him, you owe me a cock. That is a literal line. And he's like, I need you to impregnate my wife so that I have an heir. And the hero has been in love with her from the first moment he ever saw her. And he out of guilt agrees to this 1 month of basically I'll get your wife with heir. And she's like, this is insane. And they go off to this country house and totally fucking fall in love. And the whole time you're there, you're watching it, you're like, oh my God, how is this possibly going to work out?
Oh, I'm so excited.
So good. And Gorilla Twins also is a personal
Gorilla
fave.
Twins, yes, is one that everyone always read.
But then there's her most recent book I put on the best of the year list for Fated Mates, Scoundrel of My Heart, which is really charming. It's the heroine has to marry a title in order to inherit, which is not legally real, but whatever, who cares? Don't worry about it.
I don't know.
She has to marry a title in order to inherit, and he's the second son. And like, it's a really lovely, like, quarantine romance in the sense that, like, it was written during the pandemic and it is like delightful and fun and romantic. And I love these two people. I think Lorraine's great. I love.
Okay. Both on the team. That's the thing. It's like she was, again, like you said, like swinging for the fences with some of the stuff in this book that we read. And like, those were like so often the best parts of it, where it's like, oh my God, she's doing it. She's going for it. Like,
Lorraine is so good. What she's great at is setting up two people who, I mean, for me, the only kind of romance I want to read is like the one where at some point during the book, I'm like, these two it can never work. Like, I don't know how this is ever going to happen. Like, nobody will ever be able to pull this off. And she is so good at the actual, like, from the jump, the premise being like, these two will never happen. So you're about to watch them fall apart. And they never do. She always has a plan.
It got real dark in this book, and we were like, oh no.
You really did. All right. Very excited to read more of that then. All right. My next one.
Yeah.
Ava Lee. Love me some Ava Lee.
This is where we're getting into, I like all of these like so much now. It's hard.
I know. I'm excited to read. I've read the third one in the series. I need to read the other one in the series. Okay. I'm really torn on these last three. Okay, ready? I think yes. The Anne Mallory is coming up here as like a very wonderful number 3.
Yay! I'm so glad.
No, it was a big favorite in the group. It was like so wonderful.
I'm so glad.
This is, I feel like, where it always gets tough. It's like the top ones are always like, they're basically,
I'm like nervous.
But I think, the Calloway edges it out slightly for me.
This is my id.
Right, Roth. I know that is your id all the way. And then Dana's last one is mine.
Oh my God, I almost like spilled my whole wine.
Oh, that would be a true tragedy.
I'm so excited because I haven't read this book, The Calloway.
The Calloway?
So I'm going to read it today.
Yes.
So, perfect.
Okay. Report back. It actually, weirdly, I feel like paired very well with the Anne Mallory. There are lots of similar hero caretaking the orphans, a wager with the heroine, like very similar like beats there that like feel so good.
And every time you thought Calloway was like doing the expected trope, she would just twist it in a way that you were like, oh, love that.
Perfect. All right. I'm going to read it tonight.
Yes. Amazing.
Thanks,
okay. All right. So let's real quick, we're going to run through for everyone what is next for SBU since this is the end of our fall season. First up this Sunday, like in 2 days from now, 6:00 Eastern time, we are hosting our casino night as the end of our fall of Vices and Dices. We put together a bunch of fun games, Fuck, Marry, Kill, Title Smash, which you inspired, Sarah. And then we're doing a romance family feud. So the form for that is in Discord. It's closing tonight. So if you haven't filled it out yet, go fill it out. You can come and play if you have not filled it out. But that's just if you want to be brought up on screen to play along. You can play in the comments or play on screen, your choice. So that is Sunday. Our secret snowflake form is closing at the end of the month. If you want to be part of the gift exchange, fill that out. We also have our movie night form. Yep. So if you want to watch some movies with us, we're going to do some Netflix holiday ones during the break. So fill that out with any suggestions you have.
So fun.
So many fun activities.
So fun.
For our break. And I think we are ready to talk about what is coming next season. So Dana, would you want to take it away?
I am bringing it on screen. Present. Oh geez, is it working?
It hasn't. Okay,
it's
loading.
Going. It's going. Oh, there we go. Seasonally Booked Up presents a very adorable slideshow because Kelly is extra. The Bailey Blizzard.
Yay!
A dirty talk blizzard.
Yes. That's
It'll
the
keep
best
us
kind of
warm this winter.
blizzard.
It will be. So yeah, we're starting with window shopping. It's going to be our first one.
Right off the holidays, it'll be right on brand. Then we're going with Tessa's favorite book of her own, Getaway Girl, which she has said on record. Is
fun.
And then one of my favorite books, Risking It All, which is so delicious and good and trophy. So I'm very excited to make everyone read it. And then a special week.
Hang on a second.
There's just a random Presley Cole hailstorm in the middle of the Bailey because obviously we have to read Monroe together. So that will be happening the week that Monroe comes out.
We're also going to have a live episode of Fate of Mates for Monroe.
A live episode?
I mean, assuming that it actually comes. So
I'm sending I feel like Presley needs to be there. Like she has to be there.
She's welcome to come.
Her and Robert. I'm like edge of my seat waiting for the announcement.
It'll be Robert. It has to be Robert, right?
Robert, right? I'm like not allowing myself to think about anyone else doing it.
I know. Well, I just feel like this is one of those situations where I'm like, I'm not going to believe it's real until it's like in my hand.
Yes. It's like, I feel like my brain almost refuses to accept that Monroe's coming out. I was also like very drunk at my best friend's wedding when the announcement came out that it was officially happening. So I'm like in my hotel bathroom, like, what? Like, I like, what was going on? So I feel like my brain is still there. Like, right, but then we're getting back to Tessa after Presley Cole.
Okay, and then we are moving on to, Tools of Engagement. Well, I got a little too quick there.
Right.
Tools of Engagement, which is one of my favorites of her newer releases.
And then we're going to do Exposed by Fate. So as you can probably tell by this point, we are doing a mix of Tessa's series so that you can get a taste of different ones. But also doing a blend this time of some frontlist and some backlist, backlist, so we can get a taste of how Tessa has evolved as an author, and also some differences in some of her more traditionally published versus like self-published, smaller indie press stuff. So Exposed by Fate is a novella, so we're actually going to pair it that week with
Worked Up.
Which is from her Jersey series, so obviously I'm a big fan.
And then next up,
I love that one.
Sweetest Fix. I'm so excited for this.
It's so cute. I love it.
We really wanted to add in Reborn Yesterday, which is Tessa's first paranormal, which was exciting. We'll get some vampire vibes.
I think this will be our first PNR as a group, our first contemporary. And then Captivated, which Tessa actually wrote with Eve Dangerfield, who I really like. So excited to see her with a co-author for that one. And then we have one more. And then,
the new one.
Ending literally the week after Hook, Line, and Sinker comes out. So we can just ease right in to her most recent release.
Perfect.
But yes, we'll share this list in the Discord for everyone. But I know we're really excited for all of these beautiful Tessa Bailey books. Yeah. Oh, thank you, everyone. I'm like loving the excitement in the chat. Yeah, no, it should be like a really, really wonderful season. And yeah, I mean, this has been such a great season. Sarah, thank you so much for coming. And
thank you for reading a book just because I was like, oh my God, you gotta read this.
I mean, I would have never even read Cressley if you had not been like, you gotta.
And now look, you're reading Monroe. Like you're throwing Monroe into a Tessa Bailey week. I love it.
Why we're here together, because of you.
Wow, thank you. I'm so grateful to all of you guys for, being so supportive of me and my obsession with romance novels, and Cressley Cole and Lorraine Heath now, and and Tessa, you're reading some of my favorite Tessa Baileys. So yay. Thanks so much, you guys. Thanks for having me always.
Oh my gosh, of course. And yeah, Sarah, if you want to hang out with us for a second after, and Dana, I think we're good to close out. All of our SB viewers, we will see you for casino night on Sunday.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks for watching. Have a good night.